still watching Primetime on ANC. An anti-dengue herbal treatment called ACT-RX Triact is at the center of a fallout between Acting Health Secretary Janet Garin and her former boss Enrique Oda. It's also believed to be one of the primary reasons for Oda's resignation. Now, one of the components of the drug is supposedly used to treat another disease, malaria. Garin had stopped the trials for the drug as soon as she took over, saying it had no approval from the Food and Drug Administration. Even the World Health Organization said it was concerned over the experimental drug.
Ona, however, stands by his decision to give the trials the green light, saying the clinical study followed all the guidelines of international research and patients who took the drug voluntarily agreed to do so. The health department's probe into the drug will conclude within 2 weeks. And joining us now in the studio is Dr. Juvencio Ordunia and former Senator Alvarez, who were involved in the clinical trials. Good evening, gentlemen, and thank you very much for joining us.
Good evening.
Dr. Ordunia, I'd like to start by asking you, is this an herbal treatment or is it a drug? Because the acting health secretary claims that it is actually a drug.
It is an herbal-based drug, and this has been in use for many, many years in China as well as all over the world, because this is composed of berberine, artemether, and artesunate, and for the malaria we are adding primaquine.
So it is a drug. It's herbal based, but it is actually really a drug. So therefore,
it is not yet approved as a drug, because we are still in the clinical trial.
So which leads me to the next question: is there FDA approval locally for this? There's none.
The approval given by FDA is for the importation of this medicine or importation for clinical trials only, not for sale as a medicine, not for sale as a drug, but only for clinical trials. And this was approved by FDA way back in June and July of 2011 or 2012, I don't remember.
I remember that when we had Secretary Garin here earlier this week, she had said that the documents for the approval, the FDA documents approving the use of this drug for trials was actually fudged, and that it had not really been signed by the proper authorities. What can you say about that?
That's not true, because any drug or anything that you import from any part of the world and passes through customs will always be approved by FDA. You cannot approve even an aspirin if you import aspirin here without an FDA approval. And these products were approved by FDA, although
only for trial, not
only
for
clinical trials.
Are you talking about our Philippine FDA
Yes.
or the US FDA?
Philippine FDA. We have the approval of the FDA in the Philippines.
Okay. Now, how did ACT-RX actually get into the country? It was imported, Commissioner Alvarez.
I was in a conference of climate change in Cancun, and some of the officers attended the committee hearing, and we started to discuss about vector-borne diseases as an aftermath of climate change, which is spreading all over the world. And they said that they have this impressive herbal medication which they're going to introduce in Haiti. And Haiti was going to undertake. And I said, Haiti, and they're Americans. I said, you speak French? And they said, hardly. If you do that in the Philippines, you won't have a hard time, because we use English. Okay. And our medical leaders are trained in the American institutions or tradition of medicine. So I asked them if they will want to try it in the Philippines, and I'm going to help them with the authorities, do a venture, government and private sector venture. And they said, why not, with your assurances. And so later they sent somebody here, and I introduced this gentleman, who was one of their officers, to Dr. Ona, and Dr. Ona convened his team, and he explained what the medicine was going to be about. It's a herbal medicine. It's a combination of 3 herbs, which Dr. Ordunia mentioned, and but the medicine themselves, although they've been used for hundreds, perhaps even thousands of years in China, and are completely safe, is administered in a new way. They use the nanospray. Nanospray breaks down the component of any matter into subatomic units, so that it can create a potency or a combination that has full force and effect when it's administered as a medication. And the medication is not administered by injection, because if you do it by injection, it passes the liver and it diminishes. So they spray it underneath the tongue, spray it. And this is what they have registered as the new patent for this form of medication.
As we've been seeing in the documents, this ACT-RX Triac had FDA approval in the U.S. as well.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so when you brought in ACT-RX Triac, it was brought in by a company, is it correct? It's a company headed by your son?
No, it's not. It was brought in a foundation. They're a foundation, in the U.S. Devoted to discovering this kind of medication, which they distribute all over the world if they make a breakthrough. And when I brought them here, they said that if we help them do the clinical studies here, which I had told them I had intended to do if it can help, because we have a great deal of cases of dengue and even malaria here. And I said, we'll assist them. And we had to organize a developmental group to help them. Errand people will get the permits here and there. And we did organize this developmental partnership with them.
I'm sorry, just to clarify, is your son involved in this in any way?
As a counselor, because at some point I wanted them to pinpoint the areas where we had, he's a member of the National Council.
And your son's name is
Excellent.
Excellent, yeah, that's right. And he was a member of the council to identify which areas they could test.
Yes, they could distribute for free, because the initial arrangement was, if we are going to help you, you have to help us lick the disease, because we know them to be existent in many places, including Palawan. Palawan is my favorite province, and of course Cagayan Valley, where I come from, in the Sierra Madre and in the Cordillera Mountain, where dengue and malaria abound.
So where did the trials begin, Dr. Ordunia?
If I remember right, we start this in late 2012.
Yes.
And was concluded, I'm talking of the dengue.
Yes.
2012, and then concluded sometime in December of 2012.
And this was in which hospital? Where was it administered?
This was done in San Lazaro. San Lazaro being the hospital where many cases are admitted, infectious diseases are admitted, in San Lazaro Hospital.
So you have to clarify for us what Secretary Garin also mentioned on a prior interview, that the test cases were children, and that having done that on children without testing first on adults was actually medically unethical. Can you clarify whether it was so?
The trials in San Lazaro were both for children and adults. Now, this has been in use, the medicine has in use for malaria, and there is no such thing as saying that it's unethical to do it only in children, because even the Helsinki documentation, children are allowed to be tested. Besides, this medicine has been used in children for a long, long time as a treatment for malaria in Palawan and all over the world. So there was no need to actually, it's being used.
Can I interject just for one bit? It is being tested, it was tested, at least a component of ACT-RX Triac, which is used for malaria, has been used as an anti-malarial treatment.
Correct.
But you're talking about this being used in combination with two other drugs, and I think that was what the DOH is taking issue with, that it's not just purely an anti-malarial drug, but it's also something of a combination of two other drugs, which may make it difficult or different to predict the side effects on the test subjects.
The only added product here is berberine.
Okay.
And berberine is being used as a food supplement and for the treatment of some other diseases like abdominal pains, and also has antiviral properties. So,
sold across the counter in this stage.
Doctor, has the combination of these drugs and the berberine, has that been tested anywhere else in the world? Because it was brought here, it was the brainchild of Commissioner Alvarez. You were the one who suggested that the testing begin here. But I'm wondering, sir, has it ever been tested anywhere else in the world?
Caribbean.
We don't need to wait to be tested in other countries.
So it's
why don't we test it first here in the Philippines? Meaning there's no unethical thing doing it first in the Philippines. Why do we have to wait for other countries before we do it ourselves?
So, but it was being tested on children when it had not been tested prior to that on adults and not been tested anywhere else in the world on humans nor on animals.
In the first place, this is not a combination of in one. These are being administered separately, meaning berberine comes in another form, artesunate and artemisinin are coming in another form, and primaquine in another form. When you talk of combination, they're all combined into one product. But in this case,
It's not?
It's not.
What's called ACT is actually, it means...
Tri-X.
ACT means, it's an acronym, correct?
Yes.
Which means? Anyway, C means combination, T means treatment.
Yes.
So it is a combination of all these four different
That's not what.
substances.
That's not our drug. The ACT is being used for malaria. That's the WHO treatment for malaria.
And this drug is?
And then also ACT,
But?
plus primaquine and berberine, but not in combination or not mixed together.
So if that's the case, it's no longer ACT per se, but it's ACT RX Triac. So then it becomes a different name.
Yes.
I think.
Okay, Dr. Ordunia, I'm just curious, out of I think there were 300 test patients, how many of those were children and how young were the children?
This was done in both the children and adults.
Yes, but how many of the 300 were children?
I don't remember, but
Is it
it's not actually 300. It's 288 to be exact. And what we did is the WHO has a standard treatment which was partly also where San Lazaro also contributed to the formulation of the standard treatment. So what was done was 144 was given the standard WHO treatment. The other 144 given the standard WHO treatment plus the RX treatment.
And I think what happened there was that in both cases, there were no deaths resulting
Correct.
from dengue. But then I suppose that's what the critics are saying was inconclusive, because in both cases, whether you gave them the combination of drugs or not, nobody died. So it was inconclusive.
But we look at the parameters. The fever lies earlier. There was stoppage of the lowering of the platelets. In other words, there were parameters that were entirely different. That's why we found out that it's actually a promising treatment for dengue. So we presented this to Secretary Ona, and Secretary Ona said, "Wow, this is something to be happy about. So can we further do it in other patients and do it in other hospitals?" That's why we asked him to sign a department order for the rollout to 6 other hospitals as a confirmatory thing.
Commissioner Alvarez, as we were talking about earlier, this was actually your idea to bring it to the country, and as Dr. Ordunia was saying, there are those who believe that it was promising. How did you feel when there was that decision by Acting Secretary Garin to stop the trials?
Because I've been personally involved in this tragedy of dengue. My chief of staff, a very bright Ateneo law graduate, 35 years old, died of dengue, started to bleed in one of our prominent hospitals here. And then we sought for donation of blood. I called Senator Gordon then, and we gave him transfusion after transfusion, but he died, yeah.
So how did
And
you
then my
take the
son
decision?
almost died. So there was no cure. There's really no cure up to now for dengue. In those serious cases, my wife's cousin-in-law was a very affluent man. There's nothing they could do. Rene Concepcion died of dengue. And my son almost died of dengue. And some other people who are close to me, when you died for dengue, prominent practitioners in medicine, could not do anything. When you reach that point where the blood level and the white blood corpuscles overwhelmed the red blood corpuscles. So when they spoke about this new way of administering these drugs one after the other, and that it does not pass the liver, they had some technical explanation for it with the nano spray. Does not pass the liver so that it gets directly to the contaminated or afflicted area of the human system, and then there's dramatic result. And as pointed out by Dr. Ordunia, the parameters are different because once this treatment is applied to the child or the elder, in 2 hours there's impressive recovery. And instead of staying in the hospital for 5 days or 7 days, takes time to recover for the dengue patient. In 2 days he's out.
Do you feel that Secretary Garin may have acted prematurely by ordering a stop to the trials and even casting down on the ethics of the clinical trials that were already done?
I think she was a bit lacking in circumspection. Someone who was in charge of protecting the health of the nation, especially because this is a scourge. They had the flare-up dengue in the Caracas region and 120 people died. In the past, mothers become desperate when their children get afflicted of this ailment.
Circumspection, of course, among the medical community, it's almost always a practice to say, let's seek a second opinion. Well, obviously, when you're consulting a doctor, let's seek a second opinion. In Dr. Garin's opinion, using an anti-malarial drug to treat dengue poses a risk in terms of making the malarial parasite immune to the drug if it's being used for another disease. Your opinion on that, Dr. Ordunia?
What they are saying is when you use monotherapy, meaning you use artemisinin only, then the possibility of getting resistance is there. But in combination, like you combine it with primaquine, I'm talking of malaria, and berberine, then that's entirely different story. Now, it so happened that we have no treatment for dengue.
Yes.
So there's a drug that the possibility of dengue being treated is there. So it's like saying that if you have erythromycin and you try it for somebody who is suffering from cancer, and it appears that it has some effect, why not use it for now we have a drug which are both caused by one is virus, one is a
parasite,
protozoa.
Yeah.
But apparently, it looks like this drug is because of berberine has antiviral properties. So they tried it on dengue, looks effective.
I gotta ask you, Dr. Ordunia, because how long have you been a practicing physician, and how long have you been in government service?
I was practicing in the rural areas for almost 20 years.
20 years?
Yes, and became an administrator and director of several regions. Region 1, Region 2, Region 1, Region 3, the Cordilleras, and also was director of the Bureau of Research and Laboratories.
Are you a specialist?
I did not get any specialty
training.
I did train in cardiology and internal medicine, but only for a short while because I have to go back to the rural areas.
Because the reason I'm asking as well, Commissioner, is that people would like to know if the credentials of the expert who's talking, especially a medical practitioner, would be so that you do have some kind of experience in the treatment of these kinds of diseases. Now, if you're talking about clinical trials of a drug, say, to treat dengue, would you be in a position to say that you do have that kind of experience?
I'm not the researcher in this case, but the researchers are from the San Lazaro people.
Okay.
The San Lazaro people have been known as a research institute.
Sila talaga yung dalubhasa doon.
Yes. And they were the ones doing. It's only that this project was under the supervision of PITA, because of the PTAC.
Because it's an alternative treatment,
Correct.
supposed to be.
Correct.
But you know, that's the point there. It's an alternative treatment, and therefore it has to undergo some kind of clinical test. No? But ito yung differences. You're explaining an anti-malarial drug could only produce some kind of resistance if used alone, monotherapy. But it's a combination therapy, which you say will actually eliminate that kind of risk.
Yes. That's
Okay.
it.
Is that something that is easily understood even by people in the DOH now? I mean, of course, Dr. Garin was saying that is the kind of risk we face by using artesunate and antimeter.
Will you? I don't actually get.
Oh, because when Dr. Garin was saying, if you use that anti-malarial drug to treat dengue, you're raising the possibility that the malarial parasite will become resistant to the drug. But you're saying only if used alone in monotherapy.
Correct.
But now it's used in combination
Correct.
with other drugs.
It doesn't have that risk.
It doesn't have that risk. You're positive of that.
Yes.
But that was the position of the WHO, the same position as Dr. Garin, which is that if you use the combination of these drugs and the berberine, then what's going to happen is it's going to lower the resistance to malaria. Do you disagree with WHO, sir?
Unfortunately, the WHO has not come up with that pronouncement.
Okay. Now,
You're saying there was never any such letter.
Yeah.
I see. Okay.
okay, and here's another thing. There was supposed to be some kind of endorsement from the DOST through Dr. Jaime Montoya. But what we've been reading from reports, and hopefully even Commissioner Alvarez can clarify that, was Dr. Montoya has said he never gave any kind of endorsement from the DOST. So, Commissioner Alvarez or Dr. Ordunia?
Can I read some excerpts from the letter of Dr. Montoya?
Yes, sir.
Based on the individual review, the PCHRD confirmed the potential of the compound as a new treatment modality for dengue, which is a disease that remains to have no accepted or proven cure. There were also no significant adverse effects observed from the 288 patients included in the study. Then I will go to the next question. Based on the above technical comments of the PCHRD, the research proponent developed an enhanced research protocol entitled Prospective, etc.
Okay.
After a series of comments and revisions, the PCHRD found the final version of the enhanced research protocol to be complete in form and content based on the prescribed format. Moreover, it was found to be scientifically valid and sound to be carried out in hospitals. The CHRD communicated this evaluation report in a letter to Secretary Ona on August 7, 2024. I can give you this.
All right, thank you very much. So this is on the letterhead of the...
PCHRD, signed by Dr.
PCHRD.
Montoya,
Okay.
and noted by Secretary Montejo.
And this was addressed to Secretary Garin, Acting Secretary Garin. All right. So, well, that part of the, I guess, the documentation clears it up, although we're really wondering why the DOST has been hesitant up to this point to speak
Now,
up.
can I also present to you this the importation permit signed from the Food and Drug Administration. There are two importation permits, one in June and one in July, and both came from the Food and Drug Administration.
And this is for the preferred and proven therapies.
Yes.
They were the importers.
Yes.
Of the we call it now the RX Triact. That's what it's called.
I think, Tony, we must draw the line between the authority to bring in the importation of the product and the authority to continue doing the clinical study. FDA does not have the authority of controlling and stopping the clinical study.
Our FDA.
Our FDA. The authority that is vested on science and technology is what is used for the clinical study.
DOST.
The Philippine Council for Health Research and Development.
Because may kalituhan doon eh. every time we think about may bagong pinasok na produkto, either as a medicine or pagkain, dapat
yan.
FDA kagad.
Correct. But for research, it's
DOST muna.
DOST yan.
Commissioner,
Binigyan
if,
ng authority ng DOST para
For
pagpatuloy yung
clinical
research.
trial.
And now, FDA cannot come in and say, you stop the research. It's not their province to regulate.
They don't have the jurisdiction over
No
it.
jurisdiction.
Okay. Now, Commissioner, you and of course Dr. Ordunia, you seem very convinced about the success of the initial trials. As you said earlier, Doctor, there was really no objection from the WHO as we had been told. And also, there seems to be, according to you anyway, the documentation is above board for the importation and the use of this drug for trial. So what then do you think, Commissioner, is the real motivation or the real reason why the trials were ordered stopped?
Well, some people have been attempting to stop this trial. Well, this trial was being done in Palawan. A certain Dr. Go, who was FDA head at the time, ordered the suspension of the trial, allegedly because there was information that the child died. And he sent investigators. What they found out when they went to the particular community, that there was no such death. And we asked for the source of information. They gave the name of a fellow supposed to be an expert from infectious disease institution, but we never found out who that fellow is. And then they went to the hospital and made some investigation. They said that certain procedures were not observed. That Dr. Go still insisted on issuing an order of suspension. And this promising character of the investigation, the clinical investigation, was already emerging. So we asked for a motion for reconsideration that it should not be suspended. And ultimately, it was explained to the Secretary of Health that this undertaking had such promises, etc. And he took it upon himself to transfer the jurisdiction of his study to PITAC, to our herbal institution. That's how it got into the jurisdiction of PITAC and removed from FDA, because it's the FDA authority at the time, the Dr. Go, has been an eager beaver in wanting to stop an experimentation, an experiment.
If it's such a great product, why? Why are there those who have objected?
Some people pointed out to me that Dr. Go is a consultant of big pharmaceutical companies. And there was emerging in the horizon a vaccine.
For
Dengue.
For dengue?
But yeah, and so we thought perhaps that there's no conflict. They can do the vaccine, we can do the cure, although it will diminish the market of the vaccine. And yet the vaccine was not readily available. It was only going to be available after some time because, you know, the research of vaccine is prolonged.
Okay, of course, we don't have the time to contact Dr. Go right now to get his side of this, and actually you've run out of time to continue this discussion. But, you know, just to wrap up, and would you think, Dr. Ordunia, that there might be a possibility that they could still continue the trials for RX Triact, or it's a totally closed thing? Well,
I'm appealing to the hierarchy to please continue and allow us the rollout. You know, it's very difficult for people with sick children of dengue in the hospital sitting down waiting for a cure which is not available and just pray that the child or the individual will not die. So I'm appealing to authorities to please allow us. And if they found out that it's not effective, so we'll just discard it. But if it's effective, this is a feather in the cap of our San Lazaro researchers. It's the San Lazaro researchers who have been who have been publishing papers in international journals who are doing this thing.
One last question.
It's just that they don't want to come out.
One last question, very quickly, just a response from either of you gentlemen. Do you think that what you've been doing as for these clinical trials has been above board and not illegal?
Yes, it's above board. I think it's visionary even. It's not just a feather in the cap of the researcher, but of this government. Because this will be a breakthrough in an area of medicine which is threatening many communities in the world. Dengue has been a flare-up in Panama, flare-up in Costa Rica, in Latin America, and especially in Africa.
Yeah.
So if you make the breakthrough here, it's a feather in the cap of this government. And I would have done my job as a commissioner for climate change, because the impact happens after a climate change disaster.
Certainly, yeah.
And I'm sure that the president will be very happy over this.
Yeah.
So I think everybody has done his job. And what is happening is a bureaucratic dictatorship on an intellectual undertaking, because a clinical study is a scientific investigation. You must not interrupt that. Allow it to its logical sequence, and after that, assess it. Will it work? Have the protocol and the procedures been observed? And has it helped the deceased or the ailing members of the population, whether young or old? They're interrupting an investigation process and invoking some mystical authority to do this.
Well, I'd like to thank the two gentlemen, Dr. Ordunia and Climate Change Commissioner Harrison Alvarez, for coming over to the studio and giving us your side of this issue. We've heard the other side, and hopefully some of the issues have been clarified with your explanations. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we did get to mention the name of Dr. Jaime Montoya of the Philippine Council for Health Research and Development. We've been trying to contact Dr. Montoya, but up to now, our attempts to have him on the line have been unsuccessful. And coming up next, we'll give you the latest on the ill-fated AirAsia Flight 8501.
Stay tuned to Primetime on ANC.